oh my goodness. Okay, I'm called to order this regular meeting of the City of Atascadero Planning Commission. It's Tuesday, December 3rd at 6 o'clock. I'll do the Pledge of Allegiance because I forgot to ask somebody else to do it.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, if we can get a roll call, please.
Commissioner Anderson,
Here.
Commissioner Carranza,
Present.
Commissioner Heath,
Present.
Commissioner Hughes,
Here.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Present.
Vice Chairperson Vanden Eyck,
Here.
Chairperson Keen,
Here.
all present.
Can we get an approval of the agenda, please?
I'll make an motion. I'll second that.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Yes.
Commissioner Heath,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Carranza,
Yes.
Commissioner Hughes,
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Vanden Eyck,
Yes.
Chairperson Keen,
Yes.
motion passes 7-0.
Okay, I'm gonna open public comment. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the commission on any matter not on this agenda and over which the commission has jurisdiction. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes, and please state your name for the record before making your presentation. Okay, seeing none, I will close public comment and move on to the consent calendar. Somebody want to approve the consent calendar?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll go ahead and second that.
Commissioner Carranza,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Heath,
Yes.
Commissioner Hughes,
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Vanden Eyck,
Yes.
Chairperson Keen,
Yes.
motion passes 7-0.
Okay, let's move on to our public hearings. Our first item is for 2650 El Camino Real, which is Fence Factory. We're gonna do ex parte first. Commissioner Carranza, any ex parte?
None.
Commissioner Schmidt,
No ex parte.
Commissioner Hughes,
No ex parte.
Commissioner Heath,
No ex parte.
Commissioner Anderson,
No ex parte.
and Vice Chairperson Vanden Eyck.
No ex parte.
And none for me either, so it's time to dazzle.
Just having some technical issues. One moment here.
Sam, I'm disappointed in you. I hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving. Any amazing Thanksgiving stories? No? Just delicious turkey?
I'll share that I found out from one of our fellow commissioners, there's a hack you can do with leftover apple pie. You put cheddar cheese on it when you melt it back in the microwave. Apples and cheese go together.
Yeah, and especially a nice sharp cheddar for that like savory and sweet. I approve. I approve of this.
You know, that's not a hack, that's a tradition.
There's leftover apple pie, really?
Aren't arteries for filling? Isn't that like what they're for? With the stuffing and the cranberry sauce, it's the best sandwich ever created. Yeah.
We have a chestnut stuffing that goes back to the old country type thing that is the best. And unfortunately, no one really ate it except for me because it was from our family. But there were like 6 people who had some, and so I didn't have any really left over. disappointing.
How you doing, Sam? Are we still filling time?
Got you covered.
Okay.
All right, everyone hear me fine? No audio issues? Okay, great. I will try to be quiet and sensitive as directed. So today we will be discussing a CUP amendment for portable toilet rentals at Fence Factory. Their location is at 2650 El Camino Real, and the city ID for this amendment is AMND 24-0078. So first, just for some broader context of the project site, again, 2650 El Camino Real. This is approximately 1.65 acres. The property fronts the El Camino Real right-of-way on the east there that you can see, and the Highway 101 right-of-way on the west, and it kind of slopes downward from northeast to southwest, so from El Camino to the 101. Currently, there are 3 commercial buildings there and a large quantity of outdoor storage associated with fence and portable toilet rentals. Their outdoor storage was already previously approved in a CUP. So the site is zoned CPK, or commercial park, and that is a zoning district that we have that's generally intended for large lot commercial or light industrial uses in northern El Camino Real. So for example, Home Depot is zoned CPK, as I understand it. North of the site, we again have more CPK. You can see on the map on the right there, as well as some multifamily sites across the street. I believe that's Emerald Ridge. To the east, we have, like I said, RMF 24, as well as some RS properties, our residential suburban district. To the south, more CPK again, and Highway 101. And then across Highway 101 to the west, you see those RS properties. And then right in the corner there, there's some open space. So just a bit of background. As I mentioned, there's already an approved entitlement for this site. Planning Commission adopted Resolution 2000-015 appropriately in 2000, approving a CUP for a fence supply business, and that included a couple of exceptions for on-site sales, rental, outdoor storage, and contract services. And so generally speaking, what they approved was what you think of in your head as the business plan for Fence Factory. They rent out fences for construction sites, for events, things like that. They store it on site, and that's generally what was approved in that resolution. However, in 2009, Fence Factory expanded the business to include portable toilet rentals. It was kind of just an expansion of the scope of their business. The city at that point considered this use consistent with the CUP. Generally with the understanding that the toilets on site were cleaned off site and that anytime they were stored on the site, they were ready to rent. And so generally back then, I would imagine the understanding would have been that as long as they're clean, they're not really going to produce any impacts that just outdoor storage of fences would produce. And so we kind of considered it within the bounds of that CUP in 2009. That said, we did receive some complaints from adjacent businesses in June of this year about odor particularly. That led to a code enforcement case where we discovered that cleaning is finalized on site. In other words, the portable toilets that are on site are not necessarily ready to rent at all times, and there is actually cleaning that's done on the Fence Factory site. So management was alerted that they either need to cease all on-site cleaning or apply for an amendment to their CUP so that we can, specifically analyze that action and the expansion of use and kind of what are the impacts, how can we condition them, all of the kind of standard process of an entitlement. So a quick summary of the project. And again, it's fairly simple. I think I've kind of said all of this already, but they're requesting an amendment to their CUP to allow the on-site cleaning of portable restrooms as an auxiliary use. The rental and storage of portable toilets, as I said, was already deemed consistent in 2009. So this amendment solely involves the on-site cleaning. That is really the only decision that's being made here today. And no operational changes are proposed besides those required by city conditions. And just to clarify what exactly that means, we did receive some public comments for this item. I think you have all seen them. I think there may have been a little bit of miscommunication in terms of how we noticed this. To be just very clear, this is already happening on the site, and it's not something that is kind of added as a new use necessarily. It's something that we're here more than anything to either legalize or say that they can't do anymore. But it is already happening, and so Essentially, if we do get public comment, about smells or other impacts that people are concerned about, I definitely would join that concern, but it is already happening. And so it's kind of a matter of comparing now and later, I suppose you could say. On to operation, getting a little bit more specific. Fence Factory currently owns approximately 100 portable toilets and a handful of larger event trailers. Those are kind of the combined porta potties that you might see at a wedding, where there's that little stairway you walk up. It's kind of like an RV shape. And they rotate on and off site as they're rented. And so from what I could see in various aerials, it looked like there were usually anywhere from like 40 to 70 on the site at any given time. Most individual toilets and all of the event trailers are emptied off site. And so what that involves generally are pumper trucks. It's the same thing that you'd use to pump a septic system or something. Those get the hose put in the tank, it pumps it out of the tank. That is generally done off site. However, when conditions preclude that from happening, if, for example, it's a really quick event and they quickly need to rotate to a new event and there just isn't time, they take the porta potties down to the Fence Factory site and essentially we'll pump and clean them there. That, based on staff analysis, is where the smell is coming from, are those pumper trucks and specifically the exhaust fumes. So all that said, units are cleaned, they're filled with deodorizing liquid, and then they're stored in the southwest corner of the lot. And any kind of diluted gray water from that cleaning drains through a culvert to a vegetated swale abutting Highway 101. And to be very, very clear, that's diluted gray water from the cleaning. At no point are any of the tanks in the porta potties actually emptied into this swale. I feel like that's kind of important to be clear about. So just a little bit of analysis against our code. The storage and rental of toilets is considered an expansion of use consistent with approved outdoor storage for fences. That's what I was saying earlier. We, in 2009, did consider that a mild expansion of use to the extent that we would kind of fold it in with the existing CUP. The cleaning of toilets can introduce new impacts. I think that's fairly obvious with regard to odor, wastewater, health impacts, things like that. They weren't considered during the original CUP, and they weren't consistent with the previous approval, and so now we're here to kind of review it against those thoughts and those impacts. Our municipal code does not directly regulate the emission of odors from commercial sales lots. That's something that we generally rely on entitlements for, because most uses that are going to be generating significant numbers of odors are uses that are going to require an entitlement in the first place. And so really the way that we regulate odors is through conditions. And that is kind of what we're conditioning for the most part today. On to odor specifically though. As I stated, the majority appears to originate from the pump truck's exhaust systems. There are some filters and deodorizers and things like that that are designed for these pumper truck systems. We're certainly not the first city that had an issue here. There are kind of industry standard filters here. The applicant wasn't using them. That was kind of, I think, the origin more than anything of that code enforcement complaint and kind of why that smell traveled. They are now installed. So I and a member of our public works staff visited the site. We observed their cleaning process. We frankly did some smell tests, if I'm being candid. And the filter does appear to be very effective at minimizing odors from the exhaust. I didn't do any measurements necessarily, but generally speaking, I was around 20 feet from the truck. It was kind of unbearable without the filter. With the filter on, it felt like I, had walked into a recently deodorized public bathroom or something. It wasn't a strong smell at all. More than anything, it was just kind of, deodorizer smell. Of course, that's subjective. But that said, conditions have been added to require that these filters are used. It's not optional. It's not, we are requiring that those filters be used as a condition of approval. And we also require regular maintenance of the filters as well. Essentially, we want to make sure, if approved, that the applicants are using it, they are maintaining it regularly. It is always being used, because it was fairly clear to me as well as to our public works staff that this is a very effective filter. Onto the site plan. This was made by planning staff, just because there are no changes happening to the site. But just to point out where all of this is and get a little bit of a visual, you can see towards the southwestern corner of the lot, outlined in red there, is the actual toilet storage. To the north of that, or a little northwest, is the drainage swale adjacent to Highway 101. And then where those pumper trucks are stored is that kind of blue rectangle there. I also took the liberty of, walking by the toilet storage area and just generally figuring out like, where is the smell coming from? Where is it strong? Kind of an investigatory visit. And it does seem more than anything that it's the pumper truck area that is causing it and kind of the active pumping of these porta potties. All that said, given that they are filtering, and given that it appears to be very effective at minimizing really the only new introduced impact, staff does recommend that Planning Commission adopts the draft PC resolution approving this amendment to CUP 2000-0002 to allow the cleaning of portable restrooms as an auxiliary use to an existing contract construction yard at 2650 El Camino Real, based on findings and subject to conditions of approval. Of course, alternatives, you can approve modifications to the project or conditions of approval for the project. You're always welcome to add conditions. You may determine that more information is needed, refer the item back to staff. If that's the case, you should clearly state the type of information that's required and move to continue the item to a future date. Or of course, you may deny the project. If that is the case, you must specify the reasons for denial of the project and make an associated finding with the action. And these are, of course, the findings and conditions, just for reference later on if we need to go back to one of these pages. These are all also in the packet as well. With that said, I think there will be a couple. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. What is an entitlement exactly?
Sorry, I'm talking in planning lingo. An entitlement is essentially a conditional use permit, a special permit. It's a discretionary approval by a legislative body that says you're allowed to do this thing that you're kind of conditionally allowed to do and that normal people can't do by right, I suppose you could say.
So what's the difference between an entitlement and a CUP?
It's a square rectangle situation. A CUP is a type of entitlement.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. My second question is, a lot of these things is planning services responsibility for monitoring. So is that going to be like a scheduled thing for you guys that you're going to go down and check and make sure the filtration is not stinky? Or is it going to be based on phone calls from the neighbors? How does that sort of work in this plan?
So we would rely on code enforcement for this. There wouldn't be, regular monitoring from planning staff. That's not typically something that we do for projects like this, even if there are, conditions that could be monitored. More than anything, as a city, we do tend to rely on the public to inform us of any code violations, and this would be no different than that.
It's just that, so when it says responsibility monitoring is planning services, you wait for a call from code enforcement?
I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were looking at the conditions there. So the responsibility and monitoring there is, I guess you could say, kind of by proxy. So planning services would be responsible for making sure that that condition is enforced, but our responsibility there would be via kind of working with code enforcement and specifying to them like, no, this is what this condition means. This is how we're interpreting it. And therefore, you should be responding to this call, or maybe this call is one that's not related to this new CUP. And so we have to link it to the old one, or so more than anything, it's an advisory position, I guess you could say.
Okay, because I mean, a lot of the comments were, we're worried about the smell, we're worried about the smell, we're worried about the smell, but I did read all the, your feedback about the filtration pumps, reducing the smell to basically a negligible level. But, and I think the Fence Factory is a local business, and I think that they will take pride in making sure that the smell stays away. But stuff happens. And so I just want it to be clear that if there is a smell in the future, that people know what they need to do in order to get it fixed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, this whole case originated from a code enforcement case in the first place. I think it's fair to say that neighbors around this area, are well aware. We received plenty of public comment. I think there are eyes on this, so to speak. And so I'm fairly confident that if these issues persist, people will call code enforcement, or they'll call me, and I'll kind of direct them towards code enforcement. And we'd be able to proceed from there.
And so if the conditional use permit is approved tonight and there's code enforcement issues and they're found to be in violation, what happens then?
Yeah, so two things, right? There's kind of the traditional code enforcement path, which I'll like get down in a minute. I do also want to point out though that this there is a condition on here, a performance condition, so to speak, that lets us re-review this in a year. If we receive multiple code enforcement complaints that this is clearly still an issue, we reserve the right to essentially go back, bring this back to Planning Commission in a year and say, hey, this is clearly still an issue. Maybe we need to add more conditions. Or maybe if it's something crazy and flagrant, then maybe we just revoke the approval. But we do kind of reserve the right to do that. On top of that, the traditional kind of code enforcement pathway would require kind of compliance with these conditions. Code enforcement doesn't just check for municipal code, but if there are projects that have conditions, they make sure that they're complying with them. That process, of course, can take time. All of the kind of T's need to be crossed and the I's need to be dotted legally. But we don't tend to, let people continue violating conditions of approval kind of with impunity. I certainly don't see that happen. And I feel like in this case, if there were continued issues with odor, our code enforcement team would take care of that.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I kind of hogged all that. Yes, Commissioner Schmidt.
Great questions. So you had mentioned within your comments, there was offsite pumping that goes on. Is there a percentage of the systems that are being pumped off versus pumped on the site that you know of?
Yeah, I wasn't given numbers on that. What I heard was essentially that it was like a large majority of them are pumped off site, and it really is very few that are on site. That said, I know that we do have a member of Fence Factory's team here, so when we get to kind of their comment, I think they'd be happy to clarify on that.
Do we know where the pumping is offsite?
So pumping off-site is generally at the site of the event. If they're like renting out the porta potties for a wedding, for example, of course, after everyone's left, they'll generally pump it, on the site of the wedding or another event. And then I'm not sure if that was in the presentation as well, but they do also dump actually out of city limits. And so any of the, I guess you could say, wastewater that they're pulling out of these units are actually being dumped at a site in Santa Maria. So there is kind of a whole process here of kind of moving that wastewater around, but at no point does it enter the city's sewer system. And at no point, are they just directly dumping out of a porta potty into the ground or anything like that.
Of the three documents we received tonight, two of them are addressed at the same location of 2710 El Camino Real. Where is that in relation to this site? And to kind of continue in that thought, the third letter references several APNs that are adjacent to the site. Do we have a map that shows that relationship?
Not pre-prepared, but I can certainly pull one up here. Give me just a moment.
So Sam, if you bring back the aerial, so 2710 is the property just south of the Fence Factory project site. So where they have sort of multiple light industrial buildings.
Oh, okay, with those 6 buildings?
Yes.
And what are those uses? Do we know?
I don't know specifically. I know they're kind of light industrial. I think a sign company, painting company, things like that.
Okay. And then the APNs, they reference residential development. So I'm saying that's the parcels that are probably across the street.
I believe that's Emerald Ridge. Yes.
Okay. In terms of code enforcement, chairperson, who performs code enforcement today? Is it the planning department or is it someone within the police department, or where's that at?
Sure. It's largely a collaborative effort. We do have a dedicated officer out of the police department, but it requires collaboration and input from multiple departments usually.
Mhm. Code enforcement generally, well, not generally, or almost all the time is complaint driven. And I know I've been disappointed with code enforcement in our city. I mean, we have a lot of violations. I mean, mainly for me, it's landscaping that we issue use permits for a lot of projects, and their landscaping eventually just goes away. And you walk up and down El Camino Real and you can see that everywhere. And so I kind of have a beef about how effective our code enforcement is. And hopefully it'll get better as we go through and continue forward. Is there any, I didn't see a condition about what percentage of cleaning could happen on the property versus it's kind of random is what we're saying now. Sometimes it happens offsite, but there are times when it doesn't happen offsite that is brought back here and then pumped. Are we able to say of your rentals, 10%, 20% of those can be pumped on site versus offsite?
So we do have a condition here that they need to pump restrooms offsite to the extent feasible. That said, I understand that that is more vaguely worded than you might like. I think once we have a member of the Fence Factory team up here and kind of let us know a little bit more specifically, you know, if they could put a number on it, I don't see why we couldn't modify that condition to have a little bit stricter language.
I would caution against a number though, if we're conditioning that they all be pumped off site with rare exception, and then we allow 10 or 20%, that could be less restrictive, and then we have less of an enforcement mechanism should they choose to dump more on site.
Mhm. You had mentioned gray water. Is there any measurement of what the gray water is? We issue gray water permits to residential uses in our city, correct? Or
We do have options for gray water plumbing from certain devices. So not a kitchen sink, not certain, obviously, restrooms, but restroom sinks and laundry facilities and things like that.
so is there any comparison of that type of gray water versus what would be rinsed out of these systems and allowed to go meander down the road onto the freeway into that swell?
So we did, when I did visit the site with our Public Works Department, of course, Public Works, you know, regulates drainage and stormwater in the city. Generally, the conclusion that was made there, because we did essentially watch this get washed and, you know, saw the water flowing down, all of that. The conclusion that was made there was that it just visibly, clearly wasn't getting to a point where we would consider making anyone, you know, us or them or anyone else really pay for testing or anything like that. There's, how should I word this? There is a certain point, obviously, where it is clear, you know, that ooh, we're getting kind of into an issue here. But I spoke with our city engineer, our deputy city engineer. They both kind of saw and were described the process and how it works. Both of them said they wouldn't have a single concern that it would meet any of the state thresholds or anything like that for pollution. In terms of going into Highway 101, that is, of course, something that is a concern. I don't want Caltrans calling me angrily, you know, saying that we're draining into their freeway. There's not a, they only are pumping these, I would say, a maximum, or I'm sorry, cleaning these a maximum of maybe a couple of times a day. And that's just on the worst days. There's not really, I would say, the quantity of water going into that swale to the extent that it would be at risk of kind of toppling over, unless there was a strong enough storm that was already going to be the case.
So overall, from what I'm hearing from your presentation, that the cleaning of the tanks somewhat falls within the use that we provided or they use on the property.
Yeah, it's basically, if this was unconditioned, I would be really concerned about impacts. And that's kind of why this is an amendment in the first place. Given the conditions that we have placed on this project, given the site visit, I don't have any concerns about pollution or odor, anything like that. I would say, obviously, there's always a chance that something could happen. There is, of course, room for a certain level of expansion of the business, and perhaps that cumulatively causes these impacts to get worse. At present, though, I don't have any concerns about the way that it's being dumped.
So is there any condition that has been created that says if for whatever reason potable toilets becomes really profitable, so we're going to increase by 100%? Is there anything that says that if they go over a certain percentage or a certain amount, that the use permit has to be reconsidered? Or what's being the amendment that we're addressing tonight would have to be reconsidered?
Right now, we have a hard cap of 150. As I said, they have approximately 100 right now. And so that obviously, that gives some ample room for expansion before they would need to come back to Planning Commission, without, at least in our judgment, being like an excessive amount where they're, really expanding the business beyond what would be reasonable. I would say, just given the fact that the odor is clearly either coming from the toilets or, in my view, from the exhaust from the pumper trucks, that obviously scales with the quantity of toilets you have either way. And so the idea with that condition is essentially just to make sure that if they get to a scale of an operation where we would be worried about just cumulatively these impacts getting worse and worse, they would need to come back to Planning Commission to expand any further.
Thank you for your clarifications.
Anybody else? Commissioner Anderson.
Thank you, Chairperson. So currently the CUP gives no allotment to cleaning whatsoever. It's basically storage of cleaned units only.
That's essentially the way that it's been interpreted. The CUP actually originally had little to do with porta potties. The CUP was for the fencing side of their business and kind of storage and rental of fences. I believe the logic at that point was if it's clean and it's not, odorous or dirty or anything, the impact of outdoor storage of porta potties is essentially the same as the impact of outdoor storage of fencing. So we considered that consistent. It was only when we had learned that they were cleaning them on site and kind of potentially introducing new impacts that way that we wanted to take a second look at it and make sure that we were putting appropriate conditions and other elements of Planning Commission review on the project.
Okay, and second question is, what limitations? There's no limitation. So once this CUP goes into effect, this amendment, then it would be up to them how much they did. They could go to 100% pumping and cleaning on site as long as they had those filters in place.
Yeah, so I think that's similar to the discussion we were
I'm trying
having.
to clarify that.
Yeah, with Commissioner Schmidt. So right now, as I was saying, the wording is a little bit is potentially a little bit vague, I guess, from certain perspectives on the condition 5 here. Just that the site's operator shall pump portable restrooms off-site to the extent feasible.
Feasible subject.
Yeah. So I think that's a discussion, that we're all open to having, is kind of maybe we could retool that to be a little bit more specific in the amount or the percentage that can be pumped off-site. But I would just reflect Kelly's comment from earlier and
Yeah, in general, they cannot pump portable restrooms on site unless it is absolutely infeasible to pump at the event location.
Okay. And then just as a historical reference, when this violation occurred, were they aware that they weren't supposed to be pumping on site and cleaning on site?
That I think is a kind of subjective judgment call. I think a lot of
In your
planning is
opinion.
trying to figure out, how honest are you being with me? My impression was that they didn't really realize that that wasn't covered, because we actually did have a letter in the original file for the original CUP from a previous planner from 2009 that was basically saying, hey, we've been made aware that you have some portable toilets on site. This is within the scope of the original CUP. So if you have neighbors that are upset about it, don't be too worried about it. That's essentially like the scope of the letter. I think they actually had requested some clarification or something like that. All that to say, the impression that I got was that they may have been under the impression porta potties on site means cleaning porta potties on site, means potentially pumping, things like that. Really the scope of what we had allowed them to do until this hearing was store, ready to rent, clean porta potties on site.
So they were pretty much operating within goodwill.
Yeah, I mean, it was something that was technically illegal, but illegal is a very harsh word. So I try not to say that.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
Yes, I'm gonna probably just note that I have a couple questions, but I think it's to the actual applicant. So I'm looking forward to having him come up. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, then if the applicant is present tonight, could he please come up? Will you come up to the microphone and say your name for the record?
Better? Better. All right. Sorry about that. My name is Brent Bonato. I am the division manager of the Fence Factory Rentals here in town. I have 36 years in the restroom business. I like to think that if I had worked for the government, I could have been retired already and making all kinds of, anyhow. We already get a name because we're a portable restroom company / fence company. We take pride in what we do. We're an essential business in town. We have lots of local customers. We do lots of work for the city, and all the different cities. One of the things that is a challenge for us that maybe you aren't aware of because you're here in city, San Luis Obispo County does not provide us a dump site. So I spend almost $700 per truck for a permit. And I think to myself, what am I getting for this permit? In which case our hauling has to be hauled to Santa Maria. Well, why does Santa Barbara County need to take all of our waste that's from here? That's kind of become an issue. We do as much pumping offsite as we can. We generally don't haul our restrooms around with waste in them. Keeping in mind the restrooms are on a weekly service, sometimes twice, sometimes 3 times a week service on construction sites that are longer term. With that being said, the waste is being pumped out of them regularly. A lot of people have the notion when they think of a restroom, it's just this big, full, smelly restroom. That may be the case at a campground or somewhere that's very remote. This is something that we do on a daily basis. We empty, we service. We have hundreds and hundreds of customers that rely on us to come to their site and fire up our pump truck and service it in somebody's driveway, on a construction location where there's 30 people, sitting around eating lunch possibly. I mean, I've seen it all over the years. So, we're pumping that off-site without a filter, meaning that it's, we're not hooked up to our filter, which we are in-house. So, and we never get complaints. There are times when in answer to your question about how often we're pumping on site and what that quantity might be or that percentage, it's as low as we can possibly make it for various reasons. We've been here in this building for 20 plus years. I'm considerate of my neighbors. I did the projects across the street when they built the Emerald Ridge. I had fence there, restrooms there. I've been in contact with Brittany, who runs that location there. We've had a couple conversations with my neighbors to the south as well. So I'm very cognizant of all my neighbors and what we're trying to do. We're trying to be good neighbors. We pride ourselves in that. We work really hard to do that. And especially with my back experience in this business, it's just something that we want to do. You know, we don't want to be known as this stinky restroom company that has, you know, stinky restrooms around town. If we have that, then we have nothing in the business, basically. So I'm confident in the fact that I can keep my neighbors happy and work really hard just to stay the level that we're at. Maybe with what's been brought up, we can improve a little bit, and we'll certainly do that. We've already made many changes. And again, I'm in contact with the neighbors, and please let me know if there's an issue. And nobody's said anything. So there's not a percentage. Again, we do as much as we can offsite. There are times like if we have a downtown special event and there's restrooms there, those restrooms get pumped before they're brought back to the yard on the city street. You know what I mean? I mean, we don't, so we don't have a lot of options. You know, we have to empty it there, or we have to bring it back to our yard and empty it in our yard. You know, it's like, which do you prefer? Or neither. You know, there's special events that require portable restrooms in this town, and we do some of them. And so again, if we don't pump it on site and we haul it back to our yard, it's being pumped in the yard, or it's being pumped out here at the park on the sidewalks. I mean, we've all seen the restrooms out here for all the special events over the years, and we've done some of them, and you know, again, we work really hard to make it right. And so that's all I can really say. I'm, you know, trust me that I don't want my name on it. I know a lot of people around this town and in Paso Robles, and I don't need anybody saying, you know, hey, Brent, I smelled one of your toilets when we walked by it. You know, I mean, it's a thing, you know, it really is. And I'd like to let you guys know how I feel about it, and that's how I feel about it. Happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Carranza.
Okay, awesome. I actually do highly respect waste management industry. So I almost went into it myself.
Thank you.
And I do it actually at all the public schools. I do zero waste work at the public school level. Trying to, inform the public of all these things is quite a job. But anyhow, I just wanted to ask about, so there was a couple letters that we did receive. And in regards to where the pumping area is, I don't know if we can go back to that picture or the diagram. But one of the 2710, Catherine, it says 2710 El Camino. I don't know if that rings a bell.
No.
But anyhow, she writes that there might be a form of a little wind tunnel starting in the area where the toilets are going to be cleaned. So we will be affected the most. You know, part of a big reason why we have a commission is because we're the folks that will come out at 6 o'clock at night in the middle of the week to support, you know, being representatives of the community. So in my mind, this is part of our due diligence, is to lift, you know, the complaints or the concerns that the community might have on things, and just follow up on that before we make decisions, you know?
Sure.
But in this site plan, is there, you know, the winds and you know this site better than anybody in this room, the little wind tunnel, is that something that you think is potentially a concern, and would it be appropriate in any other spot, or would that be a bigger predicament for you?
I can tell you that I've considered all those things, looking at my surroundings and which neighbor could it be possibly affecting. I can't come up with one, honestly.
Okay.
I can tell you that since there's not a dump site for us to travel to, and the Santa Maria one closes at 3 p.m., by the way. They're closed on weekends. They're not open on holidays. It's a tough battle. I'm spending a lot of money traveling and dump fees and traveling and fuel and wages and whatnot. The answer to your question is no. I don't see a wind tunnel anywhere. There was some times, and I'm well aware of them, but not, I guess maybe more aware of them now, when we had the complaints where I had a truck come in and maybe empty one of my trucks because there's a holiday, and I've got, you know, 100 toilets that are out that have to be serviced or whatever, maybe on a weekend. And so that truck would come in and empty my truck and haul it.
Yeah.
That was an issue. that truck came onto my property and did it. That doesn't, not making excuses or pointing fingers or something like that. So that may have been the case with one of the complaints. And in fact, one of the weekends when I had that happening, I went next door to the neighbor and just told him, look at, the dump is closed. It was 4th of July weekend, I think, 4th of July. And I explained to him what was happening and he understood, said, thanks for letting me know. And we've remedied that. That person, is not coming on property. We're taking every possible step that we can to get stuff emptied off property and not do any pumping whatsoever. We have, as Sam said, we've remedied that with the system that, the filtration system, and we're having to buy new liquid and deodorant to run through that system constantly. It's very, very expensive.
So the
And-
wind tunnel, though.
But
you
we're
don't-
doing it.
You don't think the wind tunnel issue would be,
No.
okay.
I
'Cause
can't come up
the-
with one.
Yeah, the only thing that, I guess comes to mind is I appreciate the mitigation of the effluent from the cleaning, and after, obviously the black water gets, and the sewage gets taken off site, and I know it goes to Santa Maria. So the gray water effluent, gets washed away, and it's a good mitigation, having that windrow basically there of all that vegetation. So that's the only thing I could think of is upping the windrow area, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for answering that.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. And I just wanted to say one thing based on what you just told us is you made the comment that you're trying to be a good neighbor. I would say based on your comments, you are a good neighbor. And
Thank
versus
you.
trying. You
Thank you. I appreciate
that
that.
point.
It's very important to me. Trust me.
Commissioner Hughes?
Yeah. So what type of cleaning chemicals do you use when you do pump these?
What kind of chemicals?
Yeah.
So it's a drop-in packet. There's several chemical companies that provide us in the industry that we're in. There's several. It's just a drop-in packet like you would use like in an RV type thing. And it's meant to break down solids, kill bacteria. And it's just a drop-in.
So kind of similar to like what you would use on a septic system.
Like an RV, basically.
Okay.
If you had a bag and you had an RV and you traveled and you had a bag of chemical tablets or packets and you dropped one in, that's all we do. It just dissolves into the fresh water that we put in.
Okay, that's all. Thank you so much for your presentation.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Yes, Mr. Van Den Eyck.
Thank you. I can completely understand. I'm actually the city engineer in Guadalupe, and we're one of those that does accept septic. And I understand how that is for your business. Appreciate what you do. How long do the restrooms that are unclean, when they're brought to the site, how long do they sit on site before they are cleaned? Or are they cleaned immediately, or is it within a day or two?
Immediately, or well, within a couple of days at the most. So the restroom will be brought in, it'll be empty. It'll sit there until we, generally within, at the longest, I'd say probably a week.
Mhm.
So it's sitting there empty.
Okay. And are they cleaned? We're seeing on the screen now that it has a toilet storage area. Are they cleaned there, or are they cleaned where the pumper trucks are?
They're cleaned in that storage area.
Okay.
There's a concrete pad
Okay.
there.
And so is your filter located in that?
The filter is mobile.
It's
We've
mobile,
got
you
it.
just drag it with you?
We've got it mounted to where we can move it to any place in the
Is
yard.
it on trailer or?
It's mounted to a pallet.
Okay.
Yeah, we can forklift it around as needed.
Okay.
Also on the subject is, since this has came to light, we've also kind of created a time where we're pumping if we needed to. We start at 7 a.m. So if something has to be done, we try to get it done immediately when we get there in the morning, as to not, if it's a business next door, or if it's a homeowner across the street, that maybe before they're waking up, or, wherever the case may be. So that's something else that we've managed to do as well, is really kind of create a small window, if you will, if we had to.
Now I noticed that the complaint originally came in June. I would assume that the hotter months are the stinkier months.
It can happen.
So I'm sure that if you were to clean them in the morning, that's going to help quite a bit.
Yeah. We also will up the chemical if we need to, we'll maybe add an extra packet,
Mhm.
depending on, what the weather's like too, so.
Yeah. I've been around a lot of these porta potties that have been pumped. And if they're pumped on site, it's going to smell exactly the same as if it's pumped in their yard. And then it's a pretty fast operation. So,
I don't
Yeah.
think anybody likes smelling that.
No. And,
Commissioner
and
Anderson?
if we do have to fire up the truck, it's very limited. It's when the truck is running. It's not when we're pulling the truck over to where we're going to service. It's not after we turn it off and drive it back and park it. It's literally it takes probably 30 seconds to empty a restroom out. So it's very, very limited time.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment is that during, off-site pumping and on-site pumping, usually you're only there for a short period of time during construction or something like that. So people would, it's an annoying thing, during festivals and stuff like that. Those honey pots are around and you're going to smell some, especially if you got to use them. I don't know if anybody's ever been in one on a hot day. Nothing you can do about that, right?
Right.
So I believe that you have goodwill intentions to to mitigate the smells as much as possible. You're the expert in this area.
Sure.
And so you would be the expert who I would come to go, hey, I got a problem. I gotta mitigate this. So thank you for doing that. And I think you have full intentions of keeping as few complaints as possible. And with that intent, I just wanted to ask you if you had any further questions for us or any comments?
No, I can appreciate having this conversation already as a whole. I understand it. I get it. And just know that I'm doing everything that I can to make this right and keep it right for long term. It's not something I want to deal with. I'm willing to spend the money, whatever it takes to keep this thing right. And we've made the adjustments, what little they were, even before all this happened. That's my goal. I've been in this business a long time. I don't, it's not something that I'm just out there willy-nilly, just not caring at all. It's not who I am. It's not how I run a business. It's not how I want to be looked at and known in this city or anywhere.
Commissioner Heath, anything?
Just kind of like everybody else, I'm glad to hear that he's trying to do his best, trying to be a good neighbor and putting an effort into it. That's nice to see.
And we got the restrooms set up in 2009. So we've been operating there for a long, long time before we've had any issues. I joined the company in 2018. But
One other quick question. How many complaints have there been? Is it just that one or have there been more?
I believe we received 2 within about a week of each other. I don't think I can really give out more information than that, but yeah, I think the number was 2.
And that's in.
And in terms of public comments, I think 5 in total, or was it 4? 3. Okay.
Okay. And then how long have they had the storage of the restrooms?
So they've been storing restrooms on site since 2009. I'm not honestly sure when specifically, like month to month, the cleaning operation started. I'm not sure if you know, Brent. No. Okay.
Sounds like a pretty good track record.
thank you.
Thank you, Brent, very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'm going to open up public comment. Any members of the public that would like to speak can come up to the microphone. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes and state your name for the record. Okay, seeing none. Do we need to read these public comments into the record or? Okay, perfect. All right, so I'm going to close public comment, bring it back to commission. Do you have any further questions for staff? Anybody? Any discussion? Or if somebody wants to make a motion?
No motion. Can we pull up the recommendation? Okay. All right, I motion that Planning Commission adopt draft PC resolution approving amendment AMND 24-0078 to conditional use permit use 2000-0002 to allow the cleaning of portable restrooms as an auxiliary use to an existing contract construction material yard at 2650 El Camino Real based on the findings and subject to conditions of approval.
I'll second that.
Commissioner Hughes,
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Vanden Eyck,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Carranza.
Before I say yes, I just wanted to say that I don't believe that the conditions of approval need to include the time, but I appreciate that the representative talked about the time. So I would encourage that time to be kept in the mornings because of some of the public comment about the heat and the summer and all that. So I didn't feel I needed to add that, but I appreciate that. And also, I would just really encourage about the gray water and that windrow. And if you're going to increase 50 more porta potties, to really keep an eye on that for mitigation with the gray water as the chemicals go up. But otherwise, in good standing, I really trust that this company is going to have an eye on that. And I will say yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Heath,
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Yes, I too have, based on the comments by the operator, and he seems like a very honest, reasonable person in what he explained, and I really trust that he's going to continue what he's been doing and do the best he can. So yes.
thank you. Chairperson Keen,
Yes.
motion passes 7-0.
No, not gavel yet, not till the end. Okay, so we're gonna move on to our next item, 4701 El Camino Real, Grand Oaks Paseo. Our favorite. A regular customer. Make sure you get your punch on the way out. Any ex parte, Commissioner Carranza?
It's been a while, but I recognize I've talked to an individual in the audience that's part of the development and lives there, and I'm glad that you're here.
Commissioner Schmidt,
No ex parte.
Commissioner Hughes,
No ex parte.
Commissioner Heath,
No ex parte.
Commissioner Anderson,
No ex parte?
and Chairperson Vanden Eyck,
No ex parte.
and none for me either. So we're ready.
Alrighty. So today we are also looking at a tentative tract map, a condominium map within Grand Oaks Paseo. And the city AD for this project is SBDV 24-0063. So project site, I think we have seen a picture similar to this one a couple times before, but this is specific to lot 31 of Grand Oaks. Now that is the community center building. I believe that you folks looked at a couple of months back. Right on the corner there, it's approximately 0.07 acres and currently is already approved for construction of a ground floor community center with 2 residential units on the second floor. I believe that was June. Project is zoned CR. That's a zoning district intended for a wide range of commercial, retail, and service uses, as well as mixed-use development. It's basically our just bog standard commercial zoning district, but we now do allow mixed use. And it is within Plan Development Overlay Zone PD 27, and that's what's outlined in that white line there. And that's just essentially the plan development for the entire Grand Oaks Paseo development. To the north, you can see Commercial Professional as well as LSFX, and that's just one of our single-family zoning districts. To the east, of course, more CR, as well as RMF 24, the multifamily, and again, LSFX. To the south, we have more CR, and then across El Camino Real, CS, or Commercial Services. And then, of course, to the west, El Camino Real and commercial services. So a little background. The Grand Oaks Paseo Master Plan of Development was approved by the City Council in November of 2019. The project originally included 2 amenity spaces, and that's a central open space area, a big tree in the middle, and a community building on the westernmost corner of the property. In July of 2024, City Council approved an amendment to remove a unit adjacent to that central open space area. That was Lot 14, and instead modify the community building to add 2 new units on the second floor. I'm skipping 1 or 2 steps here that I'm sure you're familiar with, but that is generally the simplified version of the story. So what this project is specifically is a tract map to create 3 condominium units within the modified community building. It is creating a separate airspace lot for the community room on the ground floor and 2 residential units on the second floor. just because I always want to be very clear on like what specifically is the scope of this project. This is just the map to divide that building into these condominium units. The building itself and the construction has already been approved by Planning Commission and City Council. So really the decision here is the difference between units for sale and units for rent. So a little bit of code analysis and a little bit of analysis of kind of the way that this process will work. So the units will be incorporated or tiered into the Grand Oaks HOA and the city's community facilities district, just like the rest of the other residential units on Grand Oaks. Approval of this map, as I mentioned, allows the residential units to be individually managed and sold. However, all construction-related entitlements, to use that word again, have already been approved, and approval of this map does not allow any kind of physical site modifications. There's nothing changing to the site as a result of this. Lastly, a condition has been added that a deed restriction must be recorded against the community space that requires city approval prior to any change in use. For the most part, all of the conditions here are fairly standard map conditions. This is a unique one just because, of course, we want to make sure that the community center stays a community center, doesn't get turned into some random retail use or something. Quick site plan. This is rotated, so it is not you if you can't read the text, but that's just the nature of having landscape screens. So this is just showing that lot 31. Again, the building that's already outlined there has already been approved. A little bit of detail. I wish I could zoom in more here, but this is just that ground floor community center. This is also in the plan set, I believe, for the approval in June or July as well. And this is just that ground floor community center. And then, of course, the two residential units on top that are intended to become airspace condominium units. And a little refresher of the building design that's already been approved, just to kind of get a better visualization of everything being put together here.
Sorry, before you move on, can you
Yes.
go back to I don't see where the commercial condominium is.
So the entire ground floor is a commercial condominium is kind of the legal term for it. It is the community center. Yeah, yeah. So it's just because it's non-residential, it is. Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. This is a fairly simple project. So on to the staff recommendation. Staff recommends that Planning Commission adopt the draft PC resolution approving tentative track map 3326 or SBDV 24-0063 for an airspace subdivision of lot 31 to create 2 residential and 1 commercial airspace condominiums on a shared common lot based on findings and subject to conditions of approval.
So literally all we're doing is changing rentals to ownership on top, those 2 units.
Mhm.
And then we're adding a deed restriction to the bottom that says, this is a community center. If you want it to be something different, you have to come to city council.
That's correct.
Okay. I just want to be clear what we're doing
Mhm.
so we can keep questions really focused and
Yeah.
on track. Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, Commissioner Schmidt, focused and on track.
Just want to clarify, make sure that I heard and read correctly was that the annexation of these 2 units into the HOA is permissible and allowed.
Well, I don't think you can.
Yes, and I believe the applicant team has already started the process with DRE to absorb these units into the HOA.
Okay, thank you.
Beautiful. Anybody else? No? Okay, let me open public comment. This is the time when the public can come forward. Oh, I forgot the applicant. Sorry, applicant, come forward if there's anything that you would like to say. That's fine. Yeah, okay, no applicant. So we'll move on to public comment. Members of the public, please feel free to come up to the podium. Limit your comment to 3 minutes, state your name for the record, and it is open. Okay, seeing no public comment, we'll bring it back to the commission. Is there any questions that y'all suddenly have come up with? Any discussion we need to be doing? Oh my God. Yes, Commissioner
Hi,
Carranza.
Chairwoman. Okay, so I just wanted to reference that, the only reason I can think that this the rental versus the.
I'm not sure we can hear
Okay.
you.
Yeah, it's hard to know because this is right here. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I'm just trying to decipher, like the last time I remember this project coming up, there was a lot of investors who were neighbors of ours, people that we all know, and they're not just pie in the sky folks that live in like a whole nother area. And so it was a very contentious thing because everybody we were trying to help make win of this, you know? And I just wanted to comment to my commissioners. I'm like, okay, so is this then going to then help support making sure that they're going to make a better investment? Like, why are we doing the rental versus the ownership? Like, who's benefiting out of
Yeah.
this? Yeah.
So if they're rental units, that means there has to be a property manager involved. And it would only be for those 2 units that the owners of that property would have to hire a property. So like some of the other units in there have been bought by commercial people or property management businesses, but the owners, the developers would still own it if they're rental units, and so they would have to come up with property management. Is what
Right,
I'm thinking.
or do
And so
the-
this way they can sell them to whoever, and then they can sort of like finish construction and just be done. And then walk away to do another project.
I mean, I was just thinking of it as, okay, who is this benefiting? Is this just making it more complicated with a monkey wrench, or are we actually making more affordable housing by having them be rentable spaces versus ones that can be turned into Airbnbs, you know, kind of thing? So-
Well, we don't really have any prevention to do either one, to keep either one of those things from happening, which is a thing I would like to talk about at some point. And so currently it would just be, if they turn into rental units, it's just about who's managing the rentals, right? If they're for sale, then anyone can buy them, and we don't, as a city, have control over that. So I think that by making them condominiums, they're treating them like all the other units. They can be part of the HOA so that no matter who owns them, the HOA can oversee them to make sure that they're being cared for by whoever owns them. If they stay rental units, then the developer stays involved, or they can, yeah, it just seems like a simpler plan to just sell them and let someone who wants to take care of them take care of them.
I mean, that's essentially where my question boils down to. Is it simpler, or is this just cleaner cut for the developer when it could be not in his hands afterwards, and it creates more affordable housing for renters? So that's all I'm getting at. So.
Yes, Commissioner Schmidt.
I think to answer your question, last time when you were here, like you identified, there were a number of people who were very much concerned about what was happening at that time. And at this point, despite the issue, there are not people here complaining about what they're offering to do with this unit. So I take that as visible evidence that everything is on the up and up and working in the right direction.
Like a no news is good news kind of thing. But also the last time we were here, we were talking about a complete no community center and a dog park instead. And so the fact that we're back to a community center and the solution was to add more units on top of those, like that makes me think, like, if this is how they get their community center, then like, and we weren't bombarded with comments, I'm kind of with Commissioner Schmidt that like, I feel like this HOA in particular, this development in particular, would speak up if they did not want this. Because they sure did last time. So, and I guess we need to get a real estate expert on the planning commission so they can answer questions like this. Yes, Commissioner Hughes.
So I just want to say, I do believe Victoria actually brought up a really good sentiment, and oh, what was that? Oh, we do. That's why I was gonna bring something up there, but I didn't.
Okay, he's next on my
Yeah.
list. Go ahead, Commissioner Hughes.
No, I did want to say that Victoria is definitely coming from a good place on that, and I understand where you're at. That no news is good news. I also want to say that that little magical spell you just did with them over there. Hopefully, when the general plan gets updated, maybe we can have that conversation. Because it is something where we do have areas where we can't overexert the authority.
Well, I think,
But we have good ones.
well, in commissioner comments and reports, I have questions on how we get that on the agenda and how we get the data that we need to do that and when we can set that on the agenda to do
Yeah.
that. So
So I'm just getting.
Commissioner Heath, can you tell us the difference and why we would or wouldn't want to do this?
I would have to put a little more thought into the planning and look at what they're actually accomplishing. But right off the top of my head, it does make it cleaner for everybody, both the developer and the community itself. And it gives more control back to the HOA.
Thank you, Commissioner Heath.
You're welcome.
I think that's what I needed to hear.
Okay, good. Okay, any other comments? Discussion? Motions?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second that motion. I don't even know what he's gonna say yet.
I'll make
No,
a
I
motion that
do.
The planning commission adopt draft PC resolution approving tentative tract map 3326 SBDV 24-0063 for an airspace subdivision of lot 31 to create 2 residential and 1 commercial airspace condominiums on a shared common lot based on findings and subject to conditions of approval.
Okay, I love the deliberation and I will second what Commissioner Jeff has to say.
Okay, Vice Chairperson Vanden Eyck.
Yes.
Commissioner Carranza,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Heath,
Yes.
Commissioner Hughes,
Yes.
Commissioner Schmidt,
Yes.
and Chairperson Keen.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
We want
Thank you all for coming.
Could we get an invite to the some inaugural party at the community center?
Yeah.
We would love to come by.
Yeah.
Let's do
When
it.
y'all have your grand opening, we'll be there. Okay, so commissioner comments and reports. So the Airbnb thing, so here's what I would like to know. I would like to know what is within our purview about the Airbnb thing. And if it is in our purview to like look at the data and whether we can like create something and recommend it to city council, or if we just have to wait for them to do something, in which case I'll go bug them. But I really feel like the Airbnb thing is something that our city hasn't necessarily addressed, unless you're about to tell me that we have and I didn't know it.
City council is actively digging into it with planning staff. We're kind of bouncing back and forth ideas on what that ordinance will look like. It's still early stages.
Okay.
There's not a lot of solid ideas kind of, is this going to be a matter of location and distance, or is it going to be, there's a lot of different kind of angles to regulate it from.
Yeah.
But that seed's been planted
Okay.
and we will see a beautiful plant soon.
Okay.
So,
Maybe you can just let us know at the planning commission when that's going to be in front of city council and.
I think you can look at the hearing where it went to city council for deliberation and discussion on directing staff to prepare an ordinance. And there's a lot of information in there about what they
What date was
gave
that?
direction
Do
on.
you know?
I do not know, but I can email it out to you guys.
That would be fabulous. Thank you. Okay, so then never mind. We'll just do our planning commission thing. Do you have a report in lieu of director not being here?
I don't know why you're looking
if
at
I have
me.
a great report for you, but we do have Del Rio Ranch, which will be coming before you, I believe, at our next hearing, if we can get that all packaged up in time. So that would be the previous Walmart site coming back for a new concept that they're moving forward with kind of an expanded RV and glamping resort and commercial center. So that has already gone through DRC. They've prepared some plans based on DRC comment, and they will be coming back to you for that. We also have a couple mixed use projects in the pipeline, one on Morrow Road and one on El Camino that will be coming to you shortly. And probably some more minor things along the way. We are in full swing on our general plan update process. We're looking at some of our draft policy direction and draft chapters. And so at some point in time, we will be bringing a couple of those things before you, either for a study session. We'll also be having some open houses after the first of the year that are both for the general plan update and the comprehensive zoning code update, because we're kind of integrating both of those together. So be on the lookout for those. So far, we've heard a lot of input about backyard chickens and things of that nature. So we want to make sure we maintain all of our Atascadero-ness in our comprehensive zoning code update, and are looking forward to hearing from the community on those items.
Is it ex parte that I have 22 chickens and so that
I
code affects me personally?
I think most Atascaderans have a number of chickens, so
Okay.
I think we're good on that.
I'll probably still admit it anyway, just so people know where I'm coming from. Yeah. Okay, so before I adjourn, I just wanted, the next meeting is like our last meeting as like us before changes are made. So I'm gonna invite everyone to wear an ugly sweater, an ugly Christmas sweater, and then I would like for us to all take a picture together.
So is there business for the next meeting, or do we have, so there will be another meeting on the 17th? Okay,
Yes, we are having the meeting on the 17th.
okay.
Okay, so ugly sweater, everyone, and then I would love a picture. Just so, because I've enjoyed being on this commission with you guys so much.
You know, I've never had an ugly sweater.
Well, Target had some. Thrift stores are great for ugly sweaters.
We'll have to run that by Vicky.
I don't wear sweaters, so that's just,
A sweater vest would work.
I don't have sweater.
A nice scarf,
I don't have
or you can
scarves.
just go buy a sweater for me, Jeff.
have
I
enough-
never ask you for
How about an
anything.
ugly tie? I have those.
All right.
Bare
mean-
chested with paint.
Yeah, if you'll just wear only the tie.
Do you have enough ugly ties that you could make a sweater out of them?
Do what you can, but don't feel like you have to go out and buy like a $50 sweater. Okay. I just thought it would be cute and fun for us to do. So anyway, so I shall adjourn, or a hat, Santa hat, that would work too. Okay. So anyways, I will adjourn this meeting to the next regular meeting on December 17th, ugly sweater day, here at 6 o'clock.